Jake Morrison sat in his office on Nexus Station, looking out at the stars through the huge window. He had been working as a diplomat for 30 years, and in all that time, the galaxy had been at peace. The peace was not an accident. Jake and other humans had worked very hard to make sure different alien species could talk to each other instead of fighting. The station was massive and floated in space, around a planet called Kepler 442b. It was like a small city where aliens from 40 different worlds came to solve their problems with words instead of weapons. Jake was the chief mediator, which meant he was the one who helped everyone get along when they disagreed. His assistant, Katie Brooks, walked into the office carrying a cup of coffee and some reports. She was young but smart, and Jake trusted her completely. Katie had been working with him for 5 years and knew how to handle the different alien species almost as well as he did. "Good morning, Ambassador," Katie said, setting the coffee on his desk. "The morning briefing is ready. We have 3 trade disputes to review and 1 territorial disagreement between the Depth Dwellers and the Rock People." Jake smiled and took a sip of his coffee. "Sounds like a normal day. What about the hegemony? Any word from War Chancellor Vexver about the mining rights discussion?" Katie's face became serious. "That's the problem, sir. They were supposed to send their response yesterday, but we haven't heard anything. Commander Walsh is getting worried about their military ships moving around in nearby systems." Commander Ryan Walsh was in charge of security for the station. He was a big man who used to be a soldier before becoming a security officer. Ryan had been telling Jake for months that the Hegemony Empire was getting more aggressive. The Hegemony was a group of alien species that liked to solve problems by fighting instead of talking. Jake stood up and walked to the window. In the distance, he could see ships from many different worlds docked at the station. There were the long, thin ships of the Depth Dwellers that looked like swimming fish. The crystal ships of the Resonance Collective sparkled like diamonds in the starlight. And there were the dark, angular ships of the Hegemony that looked like weapons even when they were not fighting. "Let's go to the main conference room," Jake said. "I want to talk to the other ambassadors about this." The conference room was enormous, with a round table that could seat representatives from all 40 species. The air was carefully controlled so that aliens who breathed different gases could all be comfortable. Some aliens sat in water tanks. Others needed very hot or very cold temperatures, and a few could only survive in environments that would kill most other life forms. Ambassador Kethra of the Depth Dwellers was already there, floating in her water suit. She was worried about hegemony ships near her people's ocean worlds. Next to her sat Crystal Singer Veltar from the Resonance Collective, whose body was made of living crystal that changed colors when she spoke. "The hegemony has been moving warships toward the neutral zone," Kethra said, her voice bubbling through the water in her suit. "My people are scared. We remember what happened before the peace accords when they tried to take our mining worlds." Jake nodded. Before the peace treaty, the hegemony had been expanding their territory by conquering other species. They were strong fighters but not very good at understanding other cultures. That made them dangerous when negotiations failed. "I will contact War Chancellor Vexver directly," Jake said. "We need to know what they are planning." Crystal Singer Veltar's body turned a deep red color, which meant she was angry. "The hegemony does not respect the accords like the rest of us. They think peace makes us weak." Just then, Ryan Walsh burst into the room. His face was pale, and he was breathing hard like he had been running. "Ambassador Morrison, we have an emergency. You need to see this right now." Jake followed Ryan to the communication center, where a large screen showed news reports from across the galaxy. What Jake saw made his stomach feel sick. A passenger ship called the Harmony's Dream had been attacked while carrying refugees from 3 different worlds. The ship was not armed and had been flying through neutral space when hegemony warships surrounded it. The news reporter was an alien with 4 eyes, who spoke in a sad voice. All 10,000 passengers are confirmed dead. The attack appears to have been deliberate, as the hegemony ships fired on escape pods and prevented any rescue attempts. Jake felt something cold and hard form in his chest. He had spent his whole career preventing exactly this kind of tragedy. The refugees on that ship had been families running from war and poverty, hoping to find better lives on peaceful worlds. Katie stood beside him, tears running down her face. 10,000 people, she whispered. Men, women, children from 3 different species. Why would they do this? Before Jake could answer, the communication system buzzed with an incoming message. The screen changed to show War Chancellor Thexver, the leader of the Hegemony Empire. He was a large alien with gray skin and red eyes, wearing military armor, covered in medals and weapons. Ambassador Morrison, Thexver said, his voice cold and proud. I assume you have seen the news about the refugee ship. Jake kept his voice steady, even though anger was building inside him like a storm. War Chancellor, that ship was protected under the Terran Accords. Those were innocent civilians seeking refuge. Explain your actions immediately. Thexver laughed, a harsh sound that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. The Terran Accords? That piece of paper written by weak species who fear real strength? The hegemony no longer recognizes your so-called peace treaty. The room became completely quiet. After 30 years of peace, war was coming back to the galaxy. The age of weakness is over, Thexver continued. The hegemony will take what belongs to us by right of conquest. Your diplomacy has made the other species soft and helpless. Now they will learn what real power looks like. Jake looked at the alien leader on the screen and felt something he had not experienced in decades of diplomatic work. It was not just anger or disappointment. It was pure, focused rage that seemed to burn in his chest like fire. The careful, patient diplomat who had spent his career building bridges between species was about to become something completely different. War Chancellor, Jake said quietly, his voice carrying a warning that made even Ryan Walsh step back. You have made a terrible mistake. Thexver's red eyes narrowed. Is that a threat, human? Jake Morrison, the man who had kept peace in the galaxy for 30 years, smiled. But it was not the warm smile of a diplomat. It was the cold smile of a predator. No, War Chancellor. It's a promise. The communication screen went dark after War Chancellor Thexver ended the call. Jake Morrison stood in the silent room, his hands clenched into fists. Katie Brooks had never seen her boss look like this before. The gentle diplomat who always found peaceful solutions was gone. In his place stood someone who looked very dangerous. Katie, get me a secure line to Earth Command, Jake said, his voice calm but carrying a tone that made everyone listen. Priority Alpha clearance. I need to speak with Admiral Lisa Grant immediately. Ryan Walsh moved closer to Jake. Sir, what are you planning? The other species are going to panic when they hear about this attack. Some of them might try to make deals with the hegemony to save themselves. Jake turned to face his security chief. For the first time in 5 years of working together, Ryan saw something in Jake's eyes that reminded him that humans came from Earth, a world so dangerous that most aliens called it a death world. Ryan, activate Protocol 7, Jake said quietly. Ryan's eyes went wide. Protocol 7 was something he had hoped never to hear about. It was a plan that had been created years ago, but never used. Sir, are you sure? Once we activate that protocol, there's no going back. The hegemony killed 10,000 innocent people to send a message, Jake replied. Now it's time to send them one back. Katie looked confused. What's Protocol 7? I've never heard of it. Jake walked to his private safe and opened it with his handprint and eye scan. Inside were files that Katie had never seen before. Katie, there are things about humanity that the galaxy doesn't know. Things we've kept hidden for 30 years to maintain the peace. He pulled out a thick folder marked with symbols that looked like military codes. Every human in the diplomatic corps is also a trained soldier. Every human research station has weapons hidden inside it. Every human trade ship can become a warship in less than 6 hours. The communication system buzzed, and Admiral Lisa Grant's face appeared on the screen. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and cold blue eyes. Behind her, Katie could see the bridge of a massive spacecraft. "Jake," Admiral Grant said, "I heard about the refugee ship. The President has authorized full military response. How do you want to handle this?" Jake straightened up, and Katie realized he was standing like a soldier now, not like a diplomat. "Lisa, we need to contact Dr. Elena Vasquez first. Her research on alien combat capabilities will be essential. Then activate all sleeper assets." In hegemony territory, Katie felt confused and a little scared. "Sleeper assets? What are you talking about?" Dr. Elena Vasquez appeared on another screen, calling from a research station near the edge of human space. She was a woman with dark hair and smart eyes who Katie had met at diplomatic functions. Katie had always thought she studied alien biology for peaceful purposes. "Jake, I've been tracking hegemony military movements for months," Dr. Vasquez said. "They have about 60 major warships and control 15 star systems, but they have a weakness. Their command structure is very rigid. If we can disrupt their communications, their ships won't know what to do." Admiral Grant nodded. "Our intelligence teams have been preparing for this day for years. We have people inside hegemony territory who have been posing as traders, scientists, and cultural exchange students. They're all trained military specialists." Jake turned to Katie, who was staring at him with her mouth open. "Katie, humans have been preparing for war while maintaining peace. We learned from our own history on Earth, the best way to prevent war is to be so prepared for it that your enemies are afraid to start one. But you're all diplomats," Katie said. "You solve problems with words, not weapons." Ryan Walsh smiled grimly. "Katie, humans come from a world where everything tries to kill you. The weather, the animals, the plants, even the bacteria. We learn to survive by being smarter and more adaptable than anything else. We didn't stop being warriors when we became diplomats. We just learned to hide it better." Jake opened the military file and showed Katie a picture of himself from 20 years ago. In the picture, he was wearing combat armor and standing with a group of soldiers. "I was a Marine colonel before I became a diplomat. Most of the human diplomatic corps are former military officers." Dr. Vasquez spoke from her screen. "The galaxy thinks humans are peaceful because we're good at talking to different species. What they don't understand is that we learned to talk to different species because we had to survive on a planet with millions of different dangerous life forms." Admiral Grant's voice became serious. "Jake, we have 47 ships ready to move. We also have support from resistance groups on 12 hegemony worlds. These are species that the hegemony conquered years ago and have been waiting for a chance to fight back." Katie began to understand. "You've been planning this for years. The cultural exchange programs, the trade agreements, the research stations. They were all part of a military plan." Jake nodded. "We hoped we would never need to use these plans. But when someone breaks the peace and commits genocide, diplomacy is no longer enough." On the main screen, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Hegemony forces were attacking civilian targets on 3 more worlds. They were not just breaking the peace treaty. They were trying to terrorize other species into surrendering without a fight. "The hegemony made a mistake," Jake said, watching the reports. "They think humans are weak because we prefer talking to fighting. They don't understand that we prefer talking because we're very good at fighting." Dr. Vasquez was typing on her computer while she talked. "I'm sending you detailed information about hegemony military technology and tactics. Our research teams have been studying them for years. We know exactly how their ships work and where they are vulnerable. Ryan was talking quietly into his communication device, giving orders to security teams across the station. Sir, our people are ready. We have contacts with resistance fighters on every hegemony world. Some of them have been waiting 20 years for this moment. Jake looked at Katie, who was still trying to understand everything she had learned. Katie, I'm sorry we kept this from you. But maintaining the peace required that most people, even our own allies, believed that humans were just good diplomats. Katie took a deep breath. So what happens now? Jake's expression became cold and determined. Now the hegemony learns what happens when you wake up a species from a death world. They wanted war instead of peace. They're about to discover that humans are much better at war than we ever were at peace. Admiral Grant spoke from her screen. Jake, we're ready to begin operations. The hegemony has superior numbers, but we have superior strategy and coordination. Plus, we have something they don't expect. What's that? Katie asked. Jake Morrison, the diplomat who had kept the galaxy peaceful for 30 years, smiled like a predator. We have allies they don't know about, weapons they've never seen, and tactics they can't understand. Most importantly, we have something to fight for that's more important than conquest. He looked out at the stars where hegemony ships were moving toward innocent worlds. The hegemony fights for territory and resources. We fight for the 10,000 people they murdered and for every innocent life they threaten. That makes us much more dangerous than they can imagine. The war was about to begin, but it would not be the war the hegemony expected. Jake Morrison stood in the war room that had been hidden beneath Nexus Station for 30 years. The peaceful diplomatic center above was still running normally, but down here, humans were planning the destruction of the hegemony empire. Katie Brooks looked around at all the military equipment and maps that she never knew existed. Commander Carter, show me the current hegemony positions, Jake said to a man sitting at a bank of computers. Alex Carter was the station's intelligence chief, but Katie had always thought he just handled information about trade routes and cultural exchanges. Alex brought up a huge display that showed the entire galaxy. Red dots marked hegemony ships and bases, while blue dots showed human positions. Katie was shocked to see that there were blue dots everywhere, even deep inside hegemony territory. Sir, we have assets in place on every major hegemony world, Alex reported. Our people have been working as traders, teachers, and researchers for years. The hegemony never suspected that they were all trained soldiers. Jake studied the display carefully. What about the Terran Accords? Can we use Article 47? Katie looked confused. She had helped write reports about the peace treaty many times, but she had never heard of Article 47. Alex smiled and pulled up the text of the treaty on another screen. Article 47 was buried deep in the legal language, Alex explained. It says that any species that commits genocide against treaty members loses all diplomatic protections. It also allows for proportional response from the affected parties. Jake nodded. I wrote that article myself 30 years ago. I hoped we would never need to use it, but I wanted to make sure we had legal authority if someone broke the peace this badly. On the main screen, new reports were coming in from across the galaxy. The hegemony was attacking more civilian targets, trying to scare other species into surrendering. They had destroyed a medical station that was treating sick children from 5 different worlds. Over 3,000 innocent people were dead. They're making this easy for us, Jake said quietly. Every atrocity they commit turns more species against them. Alex, start Phase 1. Alex began typing rapidly on his computer, sending activation codes to all sleeper cells. Teams Alpha through Delta are moving to secure hegemony communication stations. Teams Echo through Hotel are targeting supply depots. Katie, watched as the display changed to show human operatives moving across hegemony territory. How many people do we have inside their space? Over 2,000 trained agents, Alex replied. They've been building relationships and gathering intelligence for decades. Some of them have families and businesses in hegemony territory. They're not just spies, they're part of the communities. Dr. Carol Martinez appeared on one of the communication screens. She was calling from inside hegemony space, where she had been working as a psychologist helping alien species adapt to living together. Katie had met her at several diplomatic conferences. "Jake, I'm in position on Hegemony Prime," Dr. Martinez reported. "The local resistance groups are ready to move. They have weapons and explosives that our people smuggled in over the past 5 years." Jake looked impressed. "How many resistance fighters do we have?" "On this world alone, about 50,000. Across all hegemony territory, probably 500,000. These are people whose families were killed or enslaved when the hegemony conquered their worlds. They've been waiting for someone to give them hope." Alex pulled up another screen showing the hegemony military structure. "Sir, Dr. Martinez was right about their psychology. The hegemony command structure is very rigid. Every decision has to go through War Chancellor Thexver or his top generals. If we can cut their communications, their local commanders won't know what to do." Jake studied the information carefully. "What about their fleet movements?" "They're spreading out to attack multiple targets," Alex reported. "It's actually perfect for us. Instead of keeping their ships together where they're strong, they're dividing their forces. We can defeat them one group at a time." Katie was beginning to understand the plan. "You're not just fighting the hegemony military. You're turning their entire empire against them from the inside." "Exactly," Jake said. "The hegemony rules through fear and oppression. But they never learned how to actually govern different species or make them loyal. Every world they control has people who hate them." On another screen, Admiral Grant was coordinating with alien commanders from 12 different species. Katie recognized some of them as diplomats she had worked with, but now they were all wearing military uniforms. "Jake, the depth dwellers are ready to attack hegemony underwater mining facilities," Admiral Grant reported. "Their ships can move through water in ways that hegemony forces can't counter. We're also getting support from the Resonance Collective. Their crystal technology can disrupt hegemony communications across entire star systems." Jake smiled. This was the kind of coordination that had made the peace treaty work, but now it was being used for war. "What about the rock people? Their strength could be useful for ground operations." "Already moving," Admiral Grant replied. "They're excited about the chance to fight the hegemony in hand-to-hand combat. Apparently, they've been wanting revenge for what happened to their mining colonies 20 years ago." Alex looked up from his computers. "Sir, Phase 1 is complete. We've taken control of 17 hegemony communication stations and destroyed 8 supply depots. Their local commanders are starting to panic because they can't contact their superiors." On the display, Katie could see red dots beginning to move in confused patterns. Hegemony ships were trying to respond to attacks, but they didn't know where the attacks were coming from or how to coordinate their response. "Phase 2. Jake ordered. Across the galaxy, human agents and alien resistance fighters began attacking hegemony military installations. But these were not random attacks. Every target had been carefully chosen to create maximum confusion and disruption," Dr. Martinez reported from Hegemony Prime. "The resistance is hitting weapons factories and troop barracks. The local hegemony garrison is trying to respond, but they're being attacked from 6 different directions at once." Jake watched as more red dots on the display began flashing, indicating facilities under attack. "The beauty of this plan is that we're using the hegemony's own oppression against them. Every species they conquered wants revenge. We just gave them the tools and coordination to get it. Katie looked at the chaos spreading across hegemony territory. They must be realizing by now that this isn't just a random rebellion. Alex nodded. Intelligence reports indicate that War Chancellor Thexver is trying to pull his ships back to defend major installations. But every time he moves ships from one area, we attack somewhere else. Jake's expression became grim. The hegemony thought they were fighting a group of weak diplomatic species. They're about to learn that they declared war on a coordinated military alliance that has been preparing for this moment for 30 years. On the main screen, reports were coming in of hegemony defeats across 12 star systems. They're rigid. Command structure was falling apart as communications were cut and supply lines were destroyed. Local commanders were making desperate decisions without coordination, exactly as Jake had predicted. "Sir," Alex reported, "we're receiving surrender. Requests from hegemony forces on 3 worlds. Their local commanders are asking for terms." Jake considered this carefully. "Accept their surrenders, but make it clear that War Chancellor Thexver and his top commanders will face trial for genocide. Anyone who participated in attacking civilians will be held accountable." Katie watched her boss coordinate a war across the entire galaxy with the same calm efficiency he had once used to solve trade disputes. The gentle diplomat was gone, replaced by a strategic military mind that seemed to see every move before it happened. "Jake," Admiral Grant called from her screen, "the hegemony home fleet is moving. They're abandoning their attacks on civilian targets and heading back to defend their core systems." Jake smiled coldly. "Perfect. That's exactly what we want them to do. When they cluster their remaining ships together, we can finish this war once and for all." 3 months after the war began, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the final battle approach. The ship looked like a normal diplomatic vessel from the outside, but inside it was the most advanced command ship in the galaxy. Jake wore a military uniform instead of his diplomatic robes, and his peaceful expression had been replaced by the cold focus of a warrior. Captain Ben Turner, Jake's old friend from Military Academy, controlled the ship's operations. "Jake, our fleet is in position. 47 ships from 19 different species, all following your orders. I never thought I'd see anything like this." Jake looked at the tactical display showing the hegemony home system. The enemy had pulled most of their remaining ships back to defend their capital world, exactly as Jake had predicted. War Chancellor Thexver had fallen into the trap perfectly. "Ben, remember what we learned in the academy," Jake said. "The enemy's greatest strength can become their greatest weakness if you know how to use it against them." Major Sophie Collins appeared on the communication screen. She was leading the ground forces that would invade the hegemony capital if the space battle went well. "Commander Morrison, our troops are ready. We have 10,000 soldiers from 8 different species, plus 50,000 local resistance fighters already on the planet." Jake nodded. "Sophie, wait for my signal. We need to break their fleet first before we can safely land ground forces." Dr. Frank Lopez, who had been studying hegemony battle tactics for years, was working at a computer station on the bridge. "Sir, I'm tracking their ship movements. They're forming the standard hegemony defensive formation around their capital world. It's exactly what our war games predicted they would do." Katie Brooks stood beside Jake, now wearing a military uniform herself. She had learned that even diplomatic assistants received combat training, and she was serving as Jake's intelligence coordinator. "Jake, we're receiving reports from inside the capital. Dr. Martinez says the local government is starting to panic. They know their empire is collapsing." Jake studied the enemy formation on the tactical display. The hegemony had arranged their ships in layers around their home world, with their biggest warships in front and smaller ships behind. It looked very strong, but Jake could see the weaknesses that Dr. Lopez had identified. Lieutenant Commander Adams, are you ready with the cyber warfare attack? Jake asked. Grace Adams looked up from her computer station. She was a young woman who could hack into any computer system in the galaxy, and she had been preparing for this moment for months. Sir, I have access to 17 different hegemony communication networks. When you give the order, I can shut down their coordination systems. Captain Turner checked his instruments. Jake, all ships report ready. The Depth Dwellers are in position below the enemy formation. The Resonance Collective is ready to disrupt their shields. The Rock People ships are prepared for the frontal assault. Jake looked at his crew, then at the display showing thousands of enemy ships waiting to fight. For a moment, he thought about the 10,000 innocent people who had died on the refugee ship. This battle was for them and for everyone else the hegemony had killed or enslaved. All ships, this is Commander Morrison, Jake said into the communication system. Today we end 30 years of hegemony oppression. Every species in this fleet has lost people to their cruelty. Today we get justice for all of them. The battle began with Grace Adams cutting the hegemony communication networks. Suddenly, thousands of enemy ships could not talk to each other or receive orders from their commanders. The perfect defensive formation started to fall apart as individual ship captains made their own decisions. Now, Jake ordered. The Depth Dweller ships attacked from below, coming up from under the enemy formation like sea creatures rising from the ocean depths. Their weapons were designed to work underwater, but they were devastatingly effective in space as well. At the same time, the Resonance Collective ships sent out waves of crystal energy that disrupted the hegemony shields. The enemy ships were suddenly defenseless against the coordinated attack from multiple directions. Captain Turner coordinated the human ships in the center of the formation. Retribution to all human vessels. Execute attack pattern Delta. Target their command ships first. Jake watched as the battle unfolded exactly as he had planned. The hegemony ships were strong individually, but without coordination, they could not work together effectively. His alliance fleet moved like a single organism, with each species doing what they did best. Sophie, you're clear for ground assault. Jake ordered. The orbital defenses are down. Major Collins and her mixed species army began landing on the hegemony capital world. The local resistance fighters joined them immediately, and together they began advancing toward the government buildings where War Chancellor Thexver was hiding. Dr. Lopez looked up from his computer. Sir, we're receiving surrender signals from 60% of the enemy fleet. Their remaining ships are scattered and trying to retreat. Jake felt no satisfaction from the victory. Too many people had died because of hegemony aggression. Accept surrenders from any ship that lays down their weapons immediately. But keep firing on anyone who continues to fight. On the main screen, Jake could see explosions lighting up space as hegemony warships were destroyed or disabled. The mighty fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for decades was being torn apart in a matter of hours. Captain Turner received a report from one of the human destroyers. Jake, the hegemony flagship is trying to escape. Should we pursue? No, Jake said. Let them run. War Chancellor Thexver is on the planet's surface. That's where this war will really end. Katie looked at the tactical display, which now showed mostly blue dots with only a few red ones left. Jake, it's over. We won. Jake shook his head. The space battle is over. But we haven't won until Thexver and his war criminals face justice for what they did. On the planet below, Major Collins was fighting through the capital city with her mixed army. The hegemony ground forces were surrendering quickly when they realized they were outnumbered 10-1 and had no air support. Commander Morrison. Sophie reported from the surface. We've surrounded the government complex. War Chancellor Thexver is trapped inside with about 1,000 of his personal guards. Dr. Martinez appeared on another screen, broadcasting from inside the hegemony Capitol building. Jake, I'm here with the local resistance leaders. They want Thexver to surrender so they can put him on trial for crimes against their people. Jake considered the situation carefully. The space battle was won, but he wanted to end this war without unnecessary killing. Sophie, offer Thexver one chance to surrender. Tell him he can face trial and live, or he can fight and die. His choice. 10 minutes later, Major Collins reported back. Sir, Thexver refuses to surrender. He says he would rather die fighting than be judged by what he calls inferior species. Jake felt a cold anger settle over him. Even with his empire destroyed and his people defeated, the War Chancellor was still too proud to accept responsibility. For his crimes, Sophie, take the building, Jake ordered. Use whatever force is necessary, but try to capture Thexver alive. The families of his victims deserve to see him face justice. The final battle began on the ground as Major Collins led her troops into the government building. The fighting was fierce but brief. Hegemony soldiers who had been trained to fight other armies were no match for the combined tactics of multiple species working together. Within 2 hours, it was over. War Chancellor Thexver was captured alive, along with most of his top commanders. The Hegemony Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for over 50 years, had been completely destroyed. In less than 4 months, Jake Morrison, the diplomat who had become a general, looked out at the stars from the bridge of his command ship. The war was over, but the real work of building a lasting peace was just beginning. Katie, he said to his assistant, start preparing for the war crimes trials, and send a message to all species in the galaxy. Tell them that the Terran Accords are being rewritten. This time, everyone will know exactly what happens to anyone who breaks the peace. 6 months after the final battle, Jake Morrison sat in the same conference room where War Chancellor Thexver had declared war, but now everything was different. The room was filled with representatives from 63 different species, including many that had been freed from hegemony control. Jake wore his diplomatic robes again, but everyone knew that underneath the peaceful exterior was a man who could destroy entire empires. Agent Maria Santa stood at the side of the room, no longer pretending to be a cultural researcher. She had spent 5 years living deep inside hegemony territory, gathering intelligence and building resistance networks. Her work had been crucial to the quick victory, and now she was helping to organize the trials of hegemony war criminals. The tribunal has reached its decision, announced Judge Kethra of the Depth Dwellers. She was speaking from a special water tank that had been built for the war crimes trials. War Chancellor Thexver and his top commanders are guilty of genocide, crimes against peace, and attacks on civilian populations. Jake watched as Thexver was brought into the room in chains. The once proud alien leader looked smaller now, his military decorations replaced by prison clothes. His red eyes no longer held the arrogance that had started this war. Thexver of the former Hegemony Empire, Judge Kethra continued, you are sentenced to life imprisonment. Your military commanders who participated in attacks on civilians will serve terms ranging from 20 to 50 years. Your empire is officially dissolved, and your territory will be redistributed to the species you oppressed. Thexver looked at Jake with hatred still burning in his eyes. You think you have one human, but other species will see what you did to us. They will fear your power and unite against you. Jake stood up slowly, his expression calm but his voice carrying the authority of someone who had just won the largest war in galactic history. War Chancellor, you still don't understand. We didn't win because we were stronger than you. We won because we had something worth fighting for. Colonel Nick Williams, who had led the ground assault on the hegemony capital, stepped forward. The former hegemony worlds are being liberated according to the wishes of their original inhabitants. 12 species are getting their home worlds back. The others are choosing to form new democratic governments. Commander Helen Torres, who had coordinated the orbital bombardment that ended the war, was working with alien engineers to rebuild the damaged worlds. Sir, the reconstruction is going faster than expected. The freed species are working together to help each other. It's like they learned something from watching our alliance during the war. Jake nodded. This was what he had hoped for. The war had not just defeated the hegemony. It had shown the galaxy what different species could accomplish when they worked together instead of fighting each other. Katie Brooks, now serving as Jake's deputy ambassador, approached with a report. Jake, we've received formal requests from 15 species to join the new Galactic Alliance. They want the protection that comes with being part of our treaty system. Jake looked around the room at all the different alien species. Some breathed water, others needed extreme heat or cold, and a few existed as energy beings that could barely interact with physical matter. But they were all working together to build something better than what had existed before. The new Terran Accords will be different from the old ones, Jake announced to the assembly. Article 47 will be prominently displayed, not hidden in legal language. Everyone will know exactly what happens to anyone who commits genocide or attacks innocent civilians. Crystal singer Veltar from the Resonance Collective changed to a bright blue color, which meant she was pleased. Ambassador Morrison, our people have a saying that translates roughly to peace grows strongest in the shadow of justice. Your species has shown us what that means. Dr. Alina Vasquez appeared on a communication screen from one of the former hegemony worlds. Jake, the research stations we're building will study peaceful applications of the technologies we developed during the war. Some of the weapon systems can be converted to help with mining, construction, and space exploration. Jake appreciated that. Humans had always been good at turning tools of war into tools of peace when the fighting was over. It was one of the things that made them effective diplomats as well as soldiers. Admiral Lisa Grant called in from the new fleet headquarters near Earth. Jake, our ships are taking up patrol positions throughout the galaxy. But we're not occupying anyone's territory. We're just making sure that if another hegemony-type empire tries to rise, we'll be ready to stop them quickly. Jake had insisted on this approach. Humans would maintain a strong military presence, but they would not become conquerors themselves. The goal was to prevent war, not to rule other species. Sir, Katie said quietly, there's something you should know. 3 different species have asked if they can send their young people to Earth for education. They want to learn how humans think about solving problems. Jake smiled. This was better than he had hoped. Instead of fearing humanity's power, other species wanted to learn from human methods of cooperation and adaptation. Dr. Carol Martinez, who had spent the war organizing resistance movements, was now helping former hegemony slaves return to their homeworlds. Jake, we're seeing something interesting. The species that were oppressed by the hegemony are forming their own defense alliances. They don't want to be helpless if another aggressive empire appears. Agent Maria Santos stepped forward. Sir, our intelligence networks are being converted into early warning systems. Instead of preparing for war, we're using them to watch for signs that any species might be planning to break the peace. Jake walked to the large window that looked out at the stars. In the distance, he could see ships from dozens of different worlds, docked at the rebuilt Nexus station. Some were trading vessels, others were passenger ships carrying families reuniting after years of separation, and a few were warships keeping watch for trouble. The galaxy is at peace again, Jake said to his team. But it's a different kind of peace than we had before. The old peace was based on hope that everyone would choose to be reasonable. This peace is based on the knowledge that unreasonable behavior has consequences. Katie looked at her boss, the man who had transformed from diplomat to general and back to diplomat again. Jake, do you think this peace will last longer than the previous one? Jake considered the question carefully. Through the window he could see a group of young aliens from different species playing together on one of the station's recreation decks. Their parents were former enemies who were now working together to build a better future. Katie, the old peace lasted 30 years because we convinced everyone that cooperation was better than conflict. This peace will last longer because we proved that cooperation makes you strong enough to defend yourself against anyone who chooses conflict. He turned back to face the assembly of alien representatives. The hegemony made one crucial mistake. They thought that peaceful species were weak species. They didn't understand that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is threaten someone who has worked very hard to avoid violence. Commander Torres spoke from her engineering station. "Sir, the memorial for the refugees killed in the Harmony's dream attack is complete. Representatives from all 63 species contributed something to it." Jake nodded. "Good. People need to remember what happens when diplomacy fails and why we work so hard to make sure it succeeds." As the day ended, Jake Morrison returned to his private office. On his desk was a report he would send to Earth Command, summarizing the establishment of the new galactic order. But first, he opened his personal journal and wrote a single entry. "Today marks the end of the Hegemony War and the beginning of a new era of galactic peace. This time, everyone understands that humanity's greatest strength is not our ability to make war, but our ability to make war unnecessary. When that fails, however, the galaxy now knows that a species from a death world can be very dangerous when motivated by justice." Jake closed the journal and looked out at the stars. Somewhere among them, the next generation of aliens and humans would grow up in a galaxy where cooperation was rewarded and aggression was swiftly punished. It was the kind of peace that could last for centuries, built not on hope alone, but on respect backed by strength. The diplomat had become a general when necessary, and then returned to being a diplomat when the war was won. But the galaxy would never again make the mistake of thinking that humans were weak just because they preferred to talk rather than fight.